What's good, YouTube? It's Justice. I used to be Pay, and today I'm back with another video. And in this video, I'm going to be giving you my Mount Rushmore of 2010's rap. Now, I feel like I have a little bit of authority to speak on this because that's the era that I grew up in. That's the era of rap that raised me from a young child to a young adult where I am today. So I feel like I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this decade of rap. And I also want to say that this is just my opinion. Don't get too butthurt. It's really not that serious. But at the end of this video, if you're typing in your comments and you give me a Mount Rushmore that's different than my Mount Rushmore, you're wrong. There's no other way to put it besides you're wrong. You know, it's just the truth. But really quickly, I want to go over what Mount Rushmore really is, because I think a lot of people really start to misunderstand this concept when they talk about, oh, the Mount Rushmore of basketball, the Mount Rushmore of the NFL. Like, people start to kind of not really understand the meaning of it. So let's just go over that real quick. Mount Rushmore in real life with the 4 president faces isn't necessarily a list of the 4 best presidents ever. Now, those presidents may be some of the better presidents in history, but really they represent American ideals and they represent America the best in terms of presidents up until that point when they, built the monument. So that's what I'm going to be doing with my list. This isn't just a list of the people who I think made the best music in the decade, because then it could just be all over the place and it really wouldn't be necessarily representative of that era of rap. I could just be like, oh, well, Uzi made the best project in my opinion of the 2010s. So Uzi's on my 2010s list, even though he really started getting popping in like 2015, 2016. You know what I'm saying? So it's really supposed to be representative of the decade. These 4 faces that I'm about to put on this mountain are representative of the 2010s decade of rap. You can't tell the story of the decade without them, and they're very pivotal to this decade. And now I have a criteria in which I put these people on the list, and I will give you that criteria now. The first on the list is impact/influence, which I define as like music or cultural impact. Like, did you change the culture? Were you a part of it? Were you the center of the culture at a certain point? Did you influence people to copy your sound? Did you influence people to dress like you, to use your slang? A whole bunch of stuff like that. Did people copy the way you look, the way, just pretty much overall impact and influence, not only on rap, but just culture as a whole in the 2010s. The second criteria that I used, and this is also listed in number of importance, is numbers. I feel like you can't be a good representative of the decade without some numbers. Now, numbers aren't the number one thing. It's impact and influence, like I just said, but numbers have to be there, because those are the only real concrete metrics that we have in music. Those are the only metrics that we can look at objectively in music is numbers. So they're not the number one important thing, but they're still fairly important. I feel like you can't represent a decade if people weren't widely listening to your music during that decade. And the third and last criteria I have is quality, just because quality is such a subjective thing. From one person to the next, 2 albums could have completely different ratings. Some people might think To Pimp a Butterfly is a 10. Some people might think it's a 6.5. You know what I'm saying? So quality is subjective, but it still matters to me because, again, this is my list. So I'm still going to take into effect quality, but I can't put it at number 1 or even number 2 necessarily, just because it differs so much from person to person. And there's no real way to be like, this album is objectively good, this album is objectively bad. So now I'm going to get into my list.
Combination.
Drake and Kendrick Lamar are non-negotiables on this list. If you're making a list of 2010s rap in terms of Mount Rushmore, you can't do it without Drake and Kendrick Lamar. There's no discussion. I shouldn't even really have to explain this to you, because those 2 are 1 and 2 of that decade. No matter if you want to put Drake first or Kendrick first, it doesn't matter. They are 1 and 2. They're non-negotiables. I'm not listening to you. I'm not even going to acknowledge your list if it does not have Drake and Kendrick Lamar. Firstly, because Drake is the biggest rapper of that decade. End of sentence. Kendrick's probably number 2 or number 3. But also, again, their rise from pretty much nothing to all-time rappers in that decade, I can't leave them off the list. It's not possible. They changed the sound, had countless hits, had albums like Nothing Was the Same, Take Care, To Pimp a Butterfly, Damn, Good Kid, Mad City. Like, there's just no way you can make a 2010s rap Mount Rushmore without Drake and Kendrick Lamar. They have the numbers, they have the quality, they have the impact. I'm not really going to explain much further. This is pretty much no duh. Didn't really need to tell you that Drake and Kendrick were going to be on here.
I never found you funny. I never found you entertaining. I never found you smart. I just found you annoying.
Nicki Minaj takes the next spot on my rap Mount Rushmore. Now, I know certain people are going to be mad at this, but really, if you think about it, this is kind of a no-brainer as well. And, me and Nicki don't have the best relationship. If you know, you know. But in terms of impact, Nicki's arguably the most impactful rapper on this list. Like, there's an argument to be made there. Every modern mainstream rapper right now is influenced by Nicki Minaj. Every single one of them. I don't care if it's Cardi B, Meg Thee Stallion, Lotto, City Girls, whoever, Doja Cat, whoever you want to mention that's popping right now, Ice Spice, all of them have been influenced by Nicki Minaj. All of them are kind of byproducts of Nicki Minaj and what she did in the 2010s. They all rap like her, they dress like her, they do, their hair like her, they might make mannerisms like her. Everything that they do is kind of derivative of Nicki Minaj. And that's just the truth. I'm sorry. I don't care if you're the biggest Cardi B fan. It's the truth. Nicki Minaj is the prototype of the modern female mainstream rap star. She's the number one. She's the top dog, and then everyone's kind of like a clone of her after that. Now, obviously, all these women are individuals, and they have different things, and they're different from Nicki Minaj. But in general, the prototype of this generation in terms of female rap is Nicki Minaj. This entire era right now, speaking on the current day, not the 2010s, where female rap is really hot and women in rap are going crazy, kind of comes from Nicki Minaj, even sonically. So in terms of impact, she's arguably the most impactful artist on this list. I would still say there's one other person who gives her a run for her money. I mean, Drake and Kendrick, of course, but in terms of influence, impact, she's arguably number one. She also transcended culture outside of just hip hop. Like, she was a pop culture icon. Well, she still is, but she was a pop culture icon in the 2010s. She wasn't just, she's a big rapper. No, Nicki Minaj was everywhere in terms of pop culture. Again, influencing everything, even stuff outside of just the hip hop and rap space. Like, she's probably the biggest female rapper ever. Probably, especially outside of just rap, in terms of like influencing people who maybe they're pop fans, maybe they like Katy Perry, Taylor Swift. They're also Nicki Minaj fans. So in terms of everything encompassing, all encompassing, not just in the rap space, she's probably the biggest female rapper ever. Culturally, massive icon, the Barbie stuff, the wigs, the pink hair, the Roman stuff. She was just going crazy in the 2010s. There's no denying it. In terms of numbers, her debut album, Pink Friday, sold 375K. Her next project, Pink Print, sold 244, I believe. And Queen, the last project she dropped, or last album, I should say, not project, album, I'm speaking on albums, that she dropped in the 2010s, did about 175K. So again, great album numbers, comparable to pretty much any artist that you want to put on this list. She had 6 top 5 Billboard hits in the decade and 18 top 10 Billboard hits in the decade, I believe. I may have miscounted, but if I did, it's by 1 or 2, so you can go with those numbers pretty much. She just had like a stupid amount of commercial hits during that time. Starship, Super Bass, let me look at the list, Beauty and the Beat, Bottoms Up, like Anaconda, just a whole bunch of different hits throughout the decade. And I know a lot of specifically male fans have questions about the quality of her music, but I really don't. Pink Friday is one of the better projects of the decade. Same with Pink Print. Like, she made quality music throughout the decade. There's not really much of an argument against her in terms of quality. Maybe you just don't like her music, but in general, she made great music throughout the decade. I have no problem with her quality, and she's definitely got enough quality to be on this list. And overall, when you just look at the rap scene as a whole, and also the female rap scene, and you look at it pre-2010, pre-Nicki Minaj, and you look at it now, there's just no denying that there's been a massive change instilled in the rap game. And the only person that you can really attribute this to is Nicki Minaj. She's really the only one who was carrying the flag for female rap in the 2010s. She was the only consistent mainstream star for female rap in the 2010s. And you can just tell right now, all the women are hot right now. So most of the women in rap right now are hotter than the dudes. And I think that this can be attributed to Nicki Minaj. So even if you don't like her, whatever, say what you want about her. If you look at the landscape pre-2010 and you look at it now, you can see that there's a massive difference in the opportunities, in the spaces, and even the overall commercial success of women in rap. And the only one who was really carrying that flag was Nicki Minaj. So she gets a spot on my Mount Rushmore. So now we're at Drake, Kendrick, and Nicki.
It's an evil world we live in, but hey, I'm gonna keep living.
Now we're on to my last and most controversial entry onto my Rap Mount Rushmore of the 2010s, Future. Future might be the weakest link of this Mount Rushmore, the one that people will probably have the most issues with, but Future deserves to be here regardless. Now, Future does not have the numbers like the other people on this Mount Rushmore. He still has good numbers, by the way, but it's not like jaw-dropping, like, oh my gosh, he sold over 300K. Future doesn't really have those type of numbers. He still has good numbers, by the way, better than most rappers. And even some people who I decided to leave off the list have better numbers than Future. But in terms of impact, in terms of influence, Future is arguably the most influential rapper of the 2010s. I would actually say I think he probably is the most influential rapper of the 2010s. In terms of sonically, there's not a lot of people who can even compete with Future in terms of how he impacted the entire genre of rap in the 2010s. He even influenced some of the rappers on this list in terms of how they changed their style and their sound throughout the decade. The entire modern trap scene as we know it is influenced by Future. Lil Durk, Lil Baby, Gunna, 21 Savage, all those guys, the Kodak. Now, even obviously he's not the only person that influenced them, but he's a massive part of why these guys sound the way they sound. Even if you look at some of the weirder sides of modern day trap music, if you look at the Uzis, the Cardis, the Trippie Reds, the Juice WRLDs, there's a lot of influence from Future. They all kind of derive from Future in this modern trap scene. Even some of the younger guys, like a Yeet, they sound like Future. Sonically, Future is the architect of the 2010s. He's kind of the person that molded this sound of what modern trap is right now and in the 2010s, obviously, but even right now today. Now, Future didn't create using 808s. He didn't create melodic rap. He didn't create using auto-tune in rap. He didn't create rapping about drugs and rapping about women. He didn't create any of this stuff. He didn't create mumbling in his raps. But Future is the first person to really put all of these things together and have it be super, super popular and sound like it does in this modern scene. Because the way Future's music sounded in the 2010s ended up shaping how the genre of rap would sound over the next decade. From about 2012 to now has been shaped by Future and what he did in the early 2010s. Now, in terms of his numbers, they're not great. They're probably the worst of anybody who could actually realistically qualify for this list of the Mount Rushmore of 2010s, but they're still not terrible. DS2 sold about 150 first week. What a Time to Be Alive with Drake, which again, with Drake, but still sold about 375K first week. So not the best numbers, but he also has a whole bunch of Billboard hits that charted towards the bottom just because Future drops so much music. So he has a whole bunch of hits like towards the 80s and 60s in the 2010s decade. So all around, probably the weakest argument here for numbers. But again, that influence and impact is why he's on the list. And also, let's not forget that Future does have one of the better discographies of modern rap. Like, he can go head to head with pretty much anybody else that you want to mention in terms of discography. Like, he has Monster, Beast Mode, 56 Nights, DS2, which is arguably the best trap project of all time. It's definitely the most groundbreaking trap project of all time, and kind of, again, molded the genre as to what we know it as today. Well, the subgenre, I should say. He has What a Time to Be Alive. He has Purple Rain. He has Future, the self-titled album. Hendrix. Like, in terms of quality, Future can go up against anyone on this list. Anyone you're thinking of, anyone that's off the list, whatever you want to say, Future can go head to head with him. Like, I'm not trying to hear that. And 2015 Future is arguably the best year for a rapper of the decade. So again, in terms of quality and in terms of impact, Future's pretty much ahead of anyone. But in terms of quality, he can go head to head with whoever you want to put him against. I will put him against Drake. I'll put him against Kendrick. I'll put him against whoever else you want to put him against. Now, he may not always beat those guys, but it's at least comparable enough to where his spot on this list is justified, in my opinion, because he meets the criteria in terms of quality. His numbers are a little lackluster, but in terms of influence and impact, which is the number one criteria on my Mount Rushmore list, he blows pretty much everyone else out the water. Future, in my opinion, is 2010s rap personified pretty much. Like, the way the genre flipped after 2012 into the mid 2000s or into the mid 2010s, into the late 2010s, it's all pretty much representative of Future. Future doesn't have the crazy numbers. He does have the quality, but in terms of the sound of the 2010s of rap, Future is the architect. Future is the beginning of why trap music began to take over the genre of rap. Future is the guy who kind of pieced it together, and everyone looked and said, whoa, that's crazy. We're doing that. It's kind of part of the reasons why people like the Migos started doing things a certain way. Like everything Future did in that decade is why trap as a genre, as a subgenre of rap, is the biggest subgenre right now. It's because of Future. So I could not make a list of the 2010s Mount Rushmore, the most impactful guys of that decade, without putting Future on here, because he completely changed the entire sound of rap music pretty much. After the whole swag rap, light skin era, I guess is what I'll call it, it's all Future derivative sounds. So it would have been impossible for me to leave him off this list because I think he's the most influential rapper of the 2010s. Now, I will go through a list of honorable mentions. I know there are 2 specific honorable mentions that people are typing away in the comments. Oh my God, I can't believe you left him off, bro. You don't know anything about rap music. I can't believe. So we'll just address those now. The first one's obviously Kanye. And look, Kanye stands, put the pitchforks down, put the torches down. Okay, relax, take a deep breath. Okay. I am a huge Kanye fan myself. Kanye, in my opinion, is the greatest rapper of all time. Might be nuts, but that's my opinion. So it's not like I'm a Kanye hater. I just had to leave him off the list, okay? Now, Kanye did have massive influence in this decade. Of course, sonically, his beats, the sampling, all that stuff. Of course, even outside of just music, Kanye's fashion arguably is what he had like the most influence with the whole Yeezy brand. And when it first came out, people were saying, oh, this clothing is trash. It's oversized. It looks homeless. It's beige. There's not a lot of color. And then now when you look at the scene of fashion, pretty much everyone is wearing stuff that's similar to that. So Yeezy, the whole brand, the clothing line, took over the world in terms of influence and stuff. I understand that. I get it. Kanye also has arguably some of the best rap projects of this decade. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, arguably one of the best rap projects ever. The Life of Pablo, which probably will age as a classic. Even Yeezus, which aged really well in my opinion. A lot of people have started to take stuff from Yeezus now, and it really grew on a lot of people over the years. It was hated on at first, but really aged very well. And of course, Kanye does have the numbers to be on here as well. The only reason that I left Kanye off this list is because I just believe in terms of the impact on rap as a whole, I think Future's impact was a little bit bigger in the decade. I know that might be a hot take. People are going to be mad at me. But in terms of influencing the sound and how rap pretty much went on into the future, into the mid 2010s, into the late 2010s, and well, I guess now into now, Future and his sound just completely changed the game. It really did. And it's really made even people who were making music before Future kind of conform to this modern sound. People like Drake, people like Kendrick, even Kanye on some of his newer stuff, he kind of conformed to that modern sound, that modern trap sound. So again, Kanye definitely deserves to be on this list. He has a hell of a case to be on here, but I just think Future deserves the edge over him. The second honorable mention that I left off that's really important is J. Cole. J. Cole had a very similar rise in the decade to Drake and Kendrick, one of the greatest. He went from, nobody to one of the greatest rappers of all time in that era. Drake, and again, I'm not a J. Cole hater. I love J. Cole. He was actually my first ever favorite rapper, so that's, pretty cool nugget to write down in your notebook. I don't know. But J. Cole had one of the best albums of the 2010s, arguably one of the best albums of the last 20 years with 2014 Forest Hills Drive. So again, I'm not leaving him off the list because I don't like him or anything like that. I just think that he doesn't really have the number one criteria for me, and that is the impact and influence to be on this list. He has impact and influence, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he doesn't. But in terms of all-time 2010s decade of rap influence, I don't think J. Cole really has it to compare with a Nicki Minaj or a Future. He has the quality, he has the numbers, but in terms of that number one criteria, which again is my number one criteria on my list, I know people are going to be like, oh, well, it's your list. You made up the rules. Yeah, no shit. But in terms of his impact and influence, it doesn't really compare to Future or Nicki's, and that's why I ended up leaving him off the list. And to end off the video, I'm going to put some names that could have been on here that people might, have said in the comments down below or whatever, but they're not important enough to like really address as a whole, kind of like J. Cole and Kanye specifically. But the first one being like Travis Scott. He just came on a little too late in the decade for me in terms of like really being super popular and stuff. Young Thug, same with him. He did have a similar influence like Future on the sound of today, but again, just came on a little too late in the decade, like towards like 2014, towards the middle. Lil Wayne is off the list because in my opinion, his quality and impact really like kind of dipped after like 2014. After that, he kind of, he got a little older. Age plays a factor, so I'm not really mad at Wayne, but he's just not on the list. Same with Eminem. Eminem's quality and impact and influence really dipped off after 2013. And this is, again, mostly just due to age. So I'm not like, oh my God, they shouldn't, but they're just not on the list. So that concludes my Mount Rushmore video. That concludes my video. The Mount Rushmore of the 2010s decade of rap is Drake, Kendrick, Nicki Minaj, and Future. If you disagree, you're wrong. It's just the truth. You're wrong. If you disagree, you're wrong. But that's the end of my video. In all seriousness, leave your Mount Rushmore down below in the comments and leave some explanation. I'd love to hear why you don't have Nicki on there, because I know a lot of you guys are going to try to pinpoint Nicki as like the weak point when really she's not. Like, I'm sorry. In terms of the way that rap has changed from pre-2010 to after, in terms of female rap, like she's really not the weak link. But whatever. Leave your Mount Rushmore down below. Tell me why you got A$AP Rocky on your Mount Rushmore or whatever you got on your Mount Rushmore. Doesn't matter to me. But if you made it this far, I greatly appreciate it. Please leave a like, leave a subscribe. It means a ton. It helps me out a ton. I'm trying to pay out this college tuition. But have a great day. Be safe. Be blessed. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Peace.